Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a big show for you today. We're excited to get right into it. Good morning, Brianna.
Good morning, Robbie.
All right, well, let's see what is on the agenda. Some pretty big developments. Why don't you get us started?
Well, Tucker Carlson has released the first portion of the never-before-seen surveillance video taken inside the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. You may remember Carlson was granted access to the trove of security tapes by Speaker Kevin McCarthy, which prompted fierce backlash from Democrats and the media. With his first release of the footage, Carlson mocked January 6th as mostly peaceful chaos. Let's watch.
It turns out there's quite a bit of video you haven't seen. And that video tells a very different story about what happened on January 6th. More than 40,000 hours of surveillance footage from in and around the Capitol have been withheld from the public. And once you see the video, you'll understand why. Taken as a whole, the video record does not support the claim that January 6th was an insurrection. In fact, it demolishes that claim. And that's exactly why the Democratic Party and its allies in the media prevented you from seeing it. These were not insurrectionists, they were sightseers. Footage from inside the Capitol overturns the story you've heard about January 6th. Protesters queue up in neat little lines. They give each other tours outside the Speaker's office. They take cheerful selfies and they smile. They're not destroying the Capitol, they obviously revere the Capitol. They're there because they believe the election was stolen from them. They believe in the system. Here's the man you've heard referred to as the QAnon shaman outside the Senate chamber. These are not rioters. These are people who wandered over from a political rally.
Now, Carlson also claims the new footage dispels the January 6th committee's timeline on the death of Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick.
And several police officers in the meantime.
But Brian Sicknick should not be reduced to a prop for the political ambitions of the Democratic Party. He was a human being. The facts of his life matter, including how he died. To this day, media accounts describe Sicknick as someone who was, quote, slain on January 6th. The video we reviewed proves that is a lie. Here is surveillance footage of Sicknick walking in the Capitol after he was supposedly murdered by the mob outside. By all appearances, Sicknick is healthy and vigorous. He's wearing a helmet, so it's hard to imagine he was killed by a head injury. Whatever happened to Brian Sicknick was very obviously not the result of violence he suffered at the entrance to the Capitol. This tape overturns the single most powerful and politically useful lie that Democrats have told us about January 6th.
And just to be extra clear, those views are not representative of Rising or The Hill. The election was won by President Biden. It was not stolen from Donald Trump. So we just want to have that all squared away before we continue to talk about this. Joining us now to weigh in on the new video dump is House reporter for The Hill, Emily Brooks. Emily, welcome to Rising.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Emily, can you clarify for us what we know and don't know about some of these insinuations that Carlson is making? For example, conservatives are now alleging that the footage proves that the January 6th committee lied about Brian Sicknick, lied about Barry Loudermilk taking rioters on a reconnaissance mission, lied about Josh Hawley running away, lied about Ray Epps being a credible witness. Can you help us parse some of that?
Yeah, well, a lot of what Tucker Carlson was talking about has already been hashed out in numerous court cases and in the January 6th committee, other reporting. So let's take these one at a time. So Brian Sicknick, it was fairly well known that he did return to duty after having an encounter with a protester that had used bear spray against him. There were erroneous media reports that in the media aftermath of January 6th saying that he might have been hit in the head with a fire hydrant. And so later there were medical examiner reports that said that he died of a stroke, but that he said that perhaps what happened at January 6th contributed to that. So this is sort of a political Rorschach test on Brian Sicknick's death, if you will, and it has been hashed out before. Regarding the Jacob Chancy, the so-called QAnon shaman, video footage that Tucker Carlson shows him wandering through the Capitol with police officers following him, going past police officers and them not necessarily stopping him. What Tucker Carlson did say is that there was some dispute about how he got into the building. That's really not disputed. The Jacob Chancy did admit in a plea arrangement a year and a half ago that he was one of the first 30 rioters that entered the building after a door was broken down. And there's video footage that shows his entrance into the building. And the plea documents did say that he did not obey officers' requests to leave the building and to stop entering. And so those are the first two. I don't know how far you want to go here.
I mean, they didn't, but I see a lot of video footage there of them, it almost looks like they're escorting him around. It does look like, as Tucker said, like they're showing him around the building. What are we to make of the fact that it's alleged they said, please leave, and then he didn't, and then they just kind of walked with him? I mean, what is their thinking there?
Well, I think Capitol Police officers have said in the past that, they were overwhelmed by the number of rioters. Of course, what they shouldn't have done during that day is definitely up for dispute. But I think Capitol Police officers have said they were overwhelmed. They were trying to calmly deal with the situation. It would be unfeasible to necessarily arrest every single person at that exact time. And the goal was to get the protesters and rioters out of the building.
Yeah, it's confusing to see some of that coverage from Tucker Carlson, only because it's very familiar. The characterization of people standing in lines and basically taking a tour of the Capitol was very much prevalent in the discourse after 1/6. I mean, liberals were making jokes about how people broke in only to stand in line. Ha ha ha, look at these silly insurrectionists. So to be framing it as both new information and information that was supposed to be, or was being suppressed by liberals when it was very much actually used to be critical of and make fun of the protest, the protest insurrectionists, whatever you want to call them, it's odd. And it does seem to be serving the purpose of reframing. Like, there's no issue in showing the people wandering around the Capitol. I don't think there's anything really revealing about it, except for that if that footage becomes used exclusively to the exclusion of the footage of people breaking down the doors and forcing them their way in, committing the actual crime of breaking and entering a building that they had been told not to enter, then of course that has the possibility of establishing an alternative narrative. But what, in your view, might genuinely seem new here from the Tucker Carlson footage?
Well, like you said, a lot of what we saw was separate angles of what we have seen in the past from hours and hours of footage that has already been public from this day. I think the newest thing here was probably the footage of Ray Epps near the steps of the Capitol that Tucker Carlson showed. Of course, he has been a major interest of those on the right after footage showed him on the night of January the 5th, telling people that we need to go into the Capitol. He did sit down with the January 6th committee, and he said that he was not a federal agent or a federal informant or working behalf of anything of that. So now there is some dispute about the timeline of what he told the January 6th committee when he sent a text to his nephew, and what Tucker Carlson said was showing him about a half hour after he said that he had left the building. But there is still no evidence of him actually, engaging in. There's not a huge bombshell there. It's more a dispute about the timeline there.
Well, but I think the bombshell might be that this was a witness who was relied on by the January 6th Commission, who now we have video footage that contradicts what he told them. So, I mean, obviously people can make up, their own mind about what happened by watching actual video footage, which is why I think this release is helpful in addition to the video footage we've seen of trespassing and vandalism and property destruction and violence. But I guess maybe give us more details on how the Epps part of this is playing into the narrative about what happened on January 6th.
Yeah, maybe start by, can you clarify what the Epps testimony was used for in the 1/6 hearing? What were Democrats relying on his testimony to do? And then we can better understand what it means for his testimony to be undermined in this way.
Well, the January 6th committee did not heavily rely on the Epps testimony. They did interview hundreds of people after the committee hearings wrapped up. Those were released. A lot of the people that they talked to were not featured in their numerous hearings. And so Ray Epps was one of those that they talked to. They did talk to him after he became a really huge person of interest among the right after that video emerged. And so that, that dispute about the timeline there, one of the big things that Tucker Carlson said is, why hasn't this person been charged? The prosecutors have previously said that they didn't have enough evidence to charge him of something, and they have brought forward hundreds of cases. So that's, I'm not sure. I'm not in the position to know if that changes anything regarding that decision, but that timeline information is new.
Well, Politico's senior legal affairs reporter Kyle Chaney tweeted that Capitol Police Department sources told him the footage Tucker Carlson aired tonight of Jacob Chancy, the QAnon shaman, was virtually all available already to January 6 defendants via discovery and not actually part of a newly unearthed batch of documents. And CBS's News' Scott MacFarlane added that the Justice Department has investigated over 1,000 cases in its probe into January 6 and amassed hours in corresponding footage. So do you think, how do you think this is going to affect perceptions of what happened in January 6th, which was, we're on the anniversary of it, a 2-year anniversary of it?
Well, that video footage, as you mentioned, was available to defendants in discovery, much of it during those hours of about noon to 8 p.m., which is when the bulk of the action happened. Tucker Carlson did say on his show that a lot of what they saw in that more than 40,000 hours of footage was really irrelevant, just videos of doors with nothing happening. And so what the parts that were the action here, it's not clear. I haven't seen anybody saying that this is new footage that was not previously available to defendants from what Tucker Carlson did show. And so whether this affects cases, I mean, there has been at least one case where a lawyer has requested an extension in this after this new evidence was made clear. House Republican leaders have said that they want this to be available for taking requests from lawyers and others to review the footage in the same manner that Tucker Carlson said. And then after Capitol Police review it, perhaps it can be released to them. So that's really what is might do something here, but it's not clear whether this would affect any actual cases.
Well, Emily, thank you so much for joining us to break it down. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we're going to continue discussing this subject up next. Please stay with us.